Hey guys, welcome to this podcast has a long name because it's a joke about emo song titles. The show where I talk about concepts, news events, history, cultural happenings, and everything else emo and alternative subculture. My name's Liz, and if you're wondering about my credentials, I could technically put a picture of me in middle school, but I haven't decided if I'm going to do that yet. So if I do, you'll see it on the screen now. We're going to talk about a couple of things today. We're going to talk about sort of the foundations of emo. We're going to talk about some variations in emo genres. We're going to talk about required readings, things that I think you should listen to, watch, or read to deepen your understanding of the subculture and even feel more connected to your fellow community members in the scene, if you feel like you have any. First, I want to talk about some current events, though. Can we talk about Panic at the Disco playing all of A Fever You Can't Sweat Out? Can we talk about them releasing live in Denver? Can we talk about the merch they released? Oh my god. Never in my life have I wanted to buy Panic at the Disco merch more than that's a lie. That is a bold-faced lie. Maybe I'll find a picture of me when I was like 12, 13 years old and all of my Panic at the Disco merch and put it up here. Probably not, though. I don't even know if those photos exist because my mom hated taking photos of me as a kid when I was dressed that way. I want to talk about some of this crazy new fucking merch we got. Holy shit. The Is It Still Me That Makes You Sweat jersey. We got the hoodie with the album cover on it, but it's just like a picture frame with like some of the characters from Fever You Can't Sweat Out. And then there's also like a crew neck. There's a whole bunch of really cool shit. But by far, the thing that I want the most off of this new merch drop is the album cover blanket. It's just a Fever You Can't Sweat Out as a blanket, though. Like, yes, I definitely want to sleep in A Fever You Can't Sweat Out every single night. That's freaking awesome. I think it's kind of crazy that everybody thought Ryan Ross was going to show up to When We Were Young Fest to play A Fever You Can't Sweat Out. Like, how delusional are you guys? Be so for real. Ryan Ross is never going to come back. He, like, is wishy-washy on whether he's even going to keep the music from the Young Vans up on Spotify, although I don't really know for sure that that's his decision, or if it's more so, like, the band as a whole or whatever record label that they're with. But it's kind of cool that Spencer came out, because Spencer, when Spencer left the band, it was because, if I'm correct, it was because of substance abuse issues. So it's kind of brave of him to come back. And Brendan kind of made a comment about how Spencer is one of his closest friends. And in my brain, I was like kind of questioning that notion, because Brendan famously has not so great relationships with a lot of the past members of Panic at the Disco. Like, there's that rumor that he hit on Dallin Week's wife. I know he wasn't one of the original members, but that's still like a big thing to think about, isn't it? Like, imagine you're in a band with somebody that you consider a really close friend, and then they hit on your wife. I don't think there's any coming back from that. Like, the friendship cannot go on. Hearing Brendan refer to Spencer as a really close friend was kind of crazy and kind of enlightening to me. Also, like, the performance that he gave, I didn't get to go because I'm a college student and I live in Oklahoma, and obviously I'm not going to freaking pay for a plane ticket and a hotel room to go to Vegas to go see Panic at the Disco. Like, I do not have the means nor the time. But from what I saw, a lot of it was pretty on par with the sort of Live in Denver style recordings. Also, what a cash grab. Panic at the Disco is like, yeah, we're going to release all of Live in Denver. Girl, it's been out. It's been out. Literally, Tumblr girls have been bootlegging that on YouTube for years. Like, that's been out. I think I saw that for the first time in maybe 2016, 2017. I would have been like 12 or 13. Yeah, the fact I think that releasing Live in Denver in full is such a huge like accomplishment, and such a big, like, here you go, my children, have something to eat. No, it's not. We've eaten that. We've been chewed it up, spit it out, swallowed it, thrown it up, eaten it again. Anyway, let's move on. Our first topic is we're kind of going to get into some sort of like, what even is emo? A lot of people have a lot of questions about like, what is emo versus goth versus indie versus XYZ other thing. The way I see it, I see emo as kind of an umbrella term of all of these things because everything sort of offshoots from emo. So why wouldn't you allow it to all be under the same umbrella? I think a lot of these emo purists, okay, before the goth bitches get angry at me, let me say one thing. Emo and goth are not the same thing. They don't really stem from the same place. Well, they kind of stem from the same place, but goth is such a different subculture, and it has its own sort of values versus emo, and I feel like emo is kind of encompassing this overall umbrella of other things. But goth established itself way before emo ever did. Like, the goth history goes back like 10, 15 years longer than emo history does. Unless you count goth history as part of emo history, which I kind of do, kind of don't. I think a lot of our foundations are in goth, but I don't think it's like so ingrained because not I kind of think of it in the square rule. Like, not every rectangle is a square, but every square is a rectangle. Like, not every emo is goth, but every goth is emo. Kind of. Does that make sense, guys? Am I speaking out of my ass? Guys, am I speaking out of my ass? I'm gonna cringe so hard when I edit this later. I'm not trying to be Brittany Broski, but I do watch her a lot, and I feel like I have a lot of her same mannerisms and forms of speech. But anyway, back to the actual point. What is emo? To me, emo is an umbrella term. It kind of covers all of these, like, indie, sort of DIY, POV indie, all of that stuff I think is kind of under the same umbrella. Because what is emo short for? Emotional. If you got that Dan and Phil reference, I'm sorry for the jump scare, but I think it would be really funny if a lot of y'all got it. Because what is emo short for? Emotional. A lot of these genres rely on emotional lyrics and emotional sounds. A lot of emo is based kind of on nostalgia and loneliness, and not even always nostalgia, but like looking into the future, kind of escapism, wanting to get out of where you're at, wanting to leave where you're from and go somewhere better and bigger. Like, if you look at the Wonder Years, Suburbia, I've Given You All, Now I'm Nothing, that whole album is about escaping where you're at to go somewhere better. But ultimately, you're coming back to where you were before, because that's where your roots are. That's where you've planted your feet. That's where you've grown. But it's the concept of having to leave and coming back. I listened to that album for the first time when I was coming back from college, my first year of college. I'm a senior now. Like, I graduate in like 2 months. That's crazy. But my first summer back from college, I was reading this book, They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us, by Hanif Abdurraqib, and he was talking about the Wonder Years, that exact album. And I read that essay from They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us, and I immediately listened to the album, and that album hit so spot on, because the entirety of my childhood up until I turned 18 and moved out, I was like, I can't wait to get up and move on to something better. I can't wait to get out of this town. I can't wait to leave and go find myself and be who I really am. But then once I was there, I had this urge to go back, and then when I finally was back, I started to feel those same things again, where it's like, I want to leave again. And I think that's kind of a big part of what emo is. But another big part of that is loneliness. And I think that album kind of touches on the loneliness of coming back to where you were from and seeing that a lot of people have moved on from you. And it's kind of this like weird stale point where you get to realize that you've made new friends, but they're not here. And that you had old friends, but they're also not here. It's the loneliness of kind of realizing that to be home is not ever going to be the same as it was. But you didn't want it to be. You always wanted to leave. You always wanted to go back and return to some place that felt sort of homey, but you never wanted to stay there forever. It's kind of the same thing with like Fantastic Mr. Fox. It's like he's afraid to move on to bigger and better things, but at the same time, he doesn't want to live in a hole anymore. But sometimes you just have to live in the hole. Like, it's just not an option to leave. But yeah, that's something that you see in a lot of emo albums, a lot of emo movies, music, TV, YouTubers, like all of those things. Because I think one of the most emo things you can do on the face of the planet is make a video essay about a movie and overanalyze the crap out of it until everybody watching your video essay is super depressed. I think the second most emo thing you can do is watch that video essay. You know what? I take it back. The most emo thing you can do is make one of those video essays about somebody's really shitty album. I think emo YouTube is actually such a interesting corner of the internet because you've got all these like emo playlists. Like I'm sure you've seen them, those Midwest emo playlists where it has like a really aesthetic picture of like a sunset or a house or a car or like some people in somebody's backyard or on a porch or like a cigarette in an ashtray, and the name is something like I've missed you for 2 years and I don't think I can ever get you back, but I can never stop thinking about you. So there's like super long song titles, and then it has songs from like Michael Sarah Palin. It has like Midwest Pen Pals. It's got Mom Jeans in there because everything has Mom Jeans. It's got Modern Baseball. It's got Camping in Alaska. Like there's so many bands that would be on there. But those like emo YouTube playlists I think are so funny, but also like I've cried to them. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you cry to one of those? Those are freaking awesome. But like the emo corners of the internet are also really funny with how they evolve. Like that's kind of our current landscape. But if you look back to like 2015, 2016, emo corners of the internet, who remembers Crank That Frank? Who remembers Crank That Frank? That blue-haired bastard had all of us bitches in a chokehold. A chokehold. That man repressed emo my ass. You still have blue hair and lip piercings. Be so real. You're not repressed at all. But I remember sitting in my house during on fucking election night in 2016 when Donald Trump was getting elected. For the very first time, I was going through My Chemical Romance's music videos and watching every single one of them back to back to back. I remember that started my ascension into being like super fucking emo versus like before I was just kind of casually into it. Like I was really into the Front Bottoms before I was ever into My Chemical Romance, which tells you what kind of person I am. But I think it's really funny that was the night that I happened to go super emo. It's kind of like, is it a recession indicator? Is it a recession indicator that I'm kind of falling back into the same things that I was into in middle school? I think it damn well might be. Another funny thing about that corner of the internet is like emo memes. I had so many on lock at any given moment. If somebody triggered something, I would just like give into some random reference to a video of like Josh Dunn and Tyler Joseph giving an interview, or Panic the Disco Drunk History of Fall Out Boy, or dramatic readings of fan tweets or whatever that one Fall Out Boy video was. I was really into Fall Out Boy. I was also really into Panic at the Disco, but I think Fall Out Boy was kind of on an even playing field. Same with My Chem, but I didn't, that's a lie. I was about to say I didn't consume as much MCR like meme content. No, I totally did. You know what? Let me just list off a couple off the top of my head because I just want to like perk y'all's ears a little bit. Excuse me, could you please leave? That was a favorite. What about Easy Peasy Lemon Squeezy Pumpkin Pie, motherfucker? Or what's the Fall Out Boy one? 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 to 1. That's my favorite from Drunk History. Or It's Not a Bad Dick. It's not a bad dick. There's so many more. There's so many of them. Like, I'm sure, you know what? Leave it in the comments. Leave your favorite emo reference in the comments for me to read through so I can go have a nostalgic nervous breakdown. That's going to be great. That's going to be fantastic. A lot of our music is also about being lonely. Like, I can think of some examples. Like, I've Given Up on You by, I think, Real Friends. I think that's Real Friends. It's either Real Friends or Brand New. It's Real Friends. I knew it. It was Real Friends. Don't come at me. I know that song's popular. I just can't keep titles in my head straight. Okay? Thank you. Another one I can think of is Lonely by Dandelion Hands, or Lonely Eyes by the Front Bottoms. There's a lot of good content out there about being lonely. And I kind of like come to this question every now and then of like, does consuming this content doom me to this eternal fate forever? Like, what changes when I become happy? What changes are going to happen when I am no longer alone? What changes happen when I no longer feel alone? Like, is this something I'm just going to have in the back of my head forever, or do I eventually get to be happy? And if I get to be happy, am I still going to be the same way? Am I still going to be making the same art? Am I still going to be consuming the same kind of content? Like, I think about this question a lot because I'm a filmmaker and I make all of these movies. I make all these scripts and content, and like half of them center loneliness. And I can't help but think, is it because that's the content I'm consuming, or is that just because that's the way I feel right now? And if it is the way I feel right now, is my art going to suffer when I'm happy? I think a lot of artists have this dilemma, and I think a lot of emo artists have that dilemma. Like, I think a lot of the problems that come in with bands is like they don't feel good making their art, making their music. So how are they supposed to continue doing so? Like My Chemical Romance, they're not a band, they're an idea. Gerard Way was not doing well in 2013. That's why the band split up. Like, it doesn't feel good to constantly have to make this content necessarily. It doesn't feel good to be signed to a record label that wants you to dig into the deepest, saddest pits of yourself just to make some money, you know? And I think that's another one of the problems just within the art world as a whole. It's like, we're making all this content that's relatable because it's sad, but what happens when we're not sad anymore? Do we become unrelatable forever? Do we become unable to make money? Does our audience demographic change so drastically that our original audience can't even stay around anymore? I think this is something that we saw in the shift of Panic at the Disco. I don't think it's necessarily because of the shift to like Brendan being happy, but you can see a shift in the content from the music that they're making. It goes from being sort of like a little bit more angsty to being more like happy. Like, Brendan Urie made a song with Taylor Swift. I think that's where he lost a lot of people. I think that's where a lot of people were saying, this is no longer Panic at the Disco, this is Brendan Urie and his one-man show, his one-man Broadway show. Be so for real. But I don't think that necessarily dooms the rest of the fandom to never want to go see Panic live again. I don't think it dooms Panic at the Disco to forever be this happy pop band. And we saw proof of that at When We Were Young Fest, when they played A Fever You Can't Sweat Out. And all of these older fans in their 20s and 30s are coming out to see Panic at the Disco play A Fever You Can't Sweat Out for the first time in 20 years. I mean, that's really an accomplishment, to have fans that'll come out for your original work. That album must have been so life-changing for so many people for that to be the case. I think it's really inspiring what Panic at the Disco did there, because I think if Fall Out Boy or, well, I mean, we kind of see it with My Chemical Romance too. They went away for 6 years and they came back to sell out more shows and sell out venues where tickets are $200 for nosebleed seats, which is a whole different problem in itself that we're not going to get into right now, but I'm sure I will down the line. But to have this sort of audience that you can keep for so long is just really impressive. I think it doesn't really matter. I don't really think it matters how Brendan's feeling at that point. If he can still perform that music, if they can still evoke that same response from the audience, it's still relatable content. It's still relatable, profitable, and valuable art. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're doomed to never be popular again just because your outlook on life changes. I think that's true of everybody. Like, you're not doomed to constantly be lonely just because you enjoy some type of content. And I don't think you're doomed to, well, not doomed. I don't think you won't be able to enjoy that content when you're in a different headspace. I still like this same type of music when I'm happy versus when I'm sad. I still like the same stuff. I may be listening to it with different ears and it may be in different contexts, but I don't feel the same way when I listen to it, but I feel the same sort of enjoyment when I'm listening to it. But yeah, that's a question that I think about a lot. The next thing I kind of want to talk about is the variations in emo music. I'm not going to talk about like every wave. I'm not going to talk about every offshoot of every genre. I'm just going to talk about some of the ones that I think are really important. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is first wave emo, sort of the foundation. Emo came from a genre called DC emotional hardcore, which was obviously in Washington, D.C. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's hardcore music with more emotional lyrics, because at the time, hardcore was pretty much only political, but with bands like Rites of Spring, Minor Threat, we're seeing a little bit more of an emotional turn in their lyrics versus what their music was before. That's all I'm really going to say about first wave emo for now. I'll do an episode on the waves later, first through fifth. The next thing I want to talk about is the emo trinity. 2016 emo trinity, aka poser emo. That's my own coined term. Don't come at me. I was a poser emo for a little bit as well. But the bands I'm thinking of when I say emo trinity are Panic! At the Disco, My Chemical Romance, and Fall Out Boy. Do not come at me with your emo quartet nonsense. Oh my god, 21 Pilots does not need to be in there. Be so for real. That is not in the emo trinity. They are later in the game. They've got like 5 less years on every other band, at least. They are not, no. If you remember that discourse in 2016, that was like a big deal. Like, we were fighting about that. The girls were fighting. But I think the emo trinity was kind of a really big sort of influencing group of bands that really got a lot of people into mainstream emo. Like, when I was in middle school, it was not cool to like that stuff. But now people in middle school are kind of like, oh, you used to like that? That's like kind of, or you like that? That's actually kind of cool. That's actually kind of awesome. It also sort of, to me, I think started the shift into getting bullied for being into that sort of thing versus like being cool for it. So we saw this kind of shift in 2019 as well, where it was like really popular on TikTok to be into these niche bands or just be away from the mainstream. It was this real push into individualism and to be niche, which I think comes a lot from TikTok and a lot just from being on the internet as much as we were as a generation. But yeah, I think that genre is really important to how emo is right now. The next genre I want to talk about is my absolute favorite genre of emo, Midwest emo. Midwest emo is kind of defined by twinkly guitar riffs and nostalgic lyrics. So it comes from the same sort of waves of emo, but Midwest emo is a little bit more underground. And a lot of people define it as only being in the Midwest, but I think it's kind of globalized itself recently because of how much access everybody has. Like, it used to be that the only way you would really find bands would be to go to local shows. Like, those really tiny micro bands would be to go to shows, go see them live, go watch them, consume their content via CD, MySpace, whatever else. And really the only way that it would spread was like the people in that town would have cousins or friends from other places that would spread it to different areas. Or they would get record deals and get played on the radio, but that really wasn't happening within the genre. I think one of the major founding emo bands was American Football. I've heard a lot of people sort of say that Captain Jazz is the founding band. I think Captain Jazz is definitely one of the founders, but when Captain Jazz split up and formed American Football, I think that's what really spearheaded the genre and sort of brought it into the mainstream. Some of the bands that I can talk about for Midwest emo are like Camping in Alaska. Again, Midwest Pen Pals. I've already mentioned them earlier, but they're one of my favorites. And like, Oh My God, Elephant. Great band. But this kind of genre with the twinkly nostalgic lyrics, it brings about a different sort of sense from bands like Panic! At the Disco, My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, where all of that stuff was really angsty and sort of angry, not so like mellowed. I think Midwest emo mellows itself out a little bit and also adds a layer of depth to those emotions. Like, we're kind of done being as angry. We're more so sad. I feel like a lot of Midwest emo lyrics also pertain more to romantic relationships and friendships than bands like Panic! At the Disco, My Chem, Fall Out Boy do. Fall Out Boy, okay, that's a lie, because Fall Out Boy, Every single song is about Mikey Way. I'm sorry, every single song is about you. Yeah, and it's all about Mikey Way. Maybe. We don't actually know that. But I think it's likely. But yeah, Midwest Emo is my favorite. I'll be talking about Midwest Emo a lot more in later shows. The next sort of variation genre I want to talk about is fifth wave. That's our current emo subgenre, kind of. It's the most diverse out of any of the emo subgenres. We're seeing people of color. We're seeing queer people. We're seeing trans people. We're seeing a lot of people making music that were not so much in the scene in the early 2000s. Because if you look at a lot of the early 2000s bands, it's like just a bunch of white guys making music. Oh my gosh, I saw this joke the other day. It was like, why are white boys making SoundCloud rap? Like, y'all need to embrace your roots and go back to making shitty emo in your basement. And I could not agree more. Bring back white boys and fuck, I can't fucking speak. Bring back white guys with guyliner making shitty music in their parents' garage. Make your music in your basement. Come back. Where's my Roderick? Where is my Roderick? Bring back white guys in guyliner making shitty music in their parents' basement. I need early My Chemical Romance, early Fall Out Boy, early Panic at the Disco back. I want to see men in makeup, because makeup is so good for guys. Bring it back. Bring it back. Where'd it go, guys? Why are y'all making SoundCloud rap? The fifth wave. I derailed myself so bad there. Oh my god. The fifth wave. It's fifth wave kind of emerged in the late 2010s, like 2018, 2019. There's kind of this revival that happened at that point. And this is what I was kind of talking about earlier, where like emo was no longer a subgenre to be ashamed of. It's more of an individualistic thing at this point now. And there's people sitting in their bedrooms on GarageBand just making shit. And you gotta remember, this is like pandemic time. I know y'all all remember what pandemic time is. People are sitting in their rooms making these fantastic albums by themselves just because they have time on their hands. And what a great thing that is, to have time on your hands and to actually do something with it instead of sitting around scrolling reels, which I'm sure these people were doing that as well. At the same time, they're making this art that's not only fulfilling them further, but it's also allowing them to sort of let go of a lot of the emotional strain that they're holding on to from being trapped in their house with their parents, with their own loneliness. And here's some band recs from fifth wave emo that I really, really enjoy. We're going to say Frat Mouse, really great. Grant Wasserstein, Pisces, great songs. I'm going to talk about Maxiel. My personal favorite Maxiel song is Easily Undone, but that song kind of sounds like an Owl City song to a lot of people. It's kind of not indicative of what they are, but I do really like that song. The Flat Stanleys, Me Versus Your Friends, great song. And then we're also going to talk about Michael Cera Palin, because you have to talk about Michael Cera Palin. They're one of those bands that is sort of quintessential fifth wave emo, and they're a great band. They've got a Sheryl Crow cover on there. Come on. I think Sheryl Crow influenced a lot of emo bands. I think she's kind of, we need to be more thankful for Sheryl Crow. I love that woman. Let's move into our final topic. It's going to be our required readings. These are things that I think if you're viewing this podcast, if you're listening to this, if you find this kind of content interesting and you want to know more, or if you just may be entertained by it, like these are things that I think viewers of this podcast would either enjoy or get something out of. The first thing I'm looking at is They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us by Hanif Abdurraqib. Hanif Abdurraqib is my favorite author. He's just my favorite. He writes in a way that is very poetic, and it romanticizes and sort of like is almost religious about small things that happen. Like one of the things he points out in one of the essays in They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us is the walk home from a Defiance, Ohio concert where people are locking arms and screaming "O Susquehanna" down the street. And he almost observes it as if it's a divine happening. And I think that's a really beautiful way to look at life. And I think it gives a lot of people hope, which we need more of. It's a scary world out there. I think we should be reading more Hanif Abdurraqib. The next thing I'm going to talk about is Emo the Musical. Now, you can find this on YouTube. You can pirate it. Whatever. You should watch Emo the Musical. It's like an hour and a half long. It's about like an Australian group of emos battling with a group of Christians from the same high school. They're going to a battle of the bands. They're going to literally go up against each other, but they're also going up against each other in high school socially. But it's a great musical. Is it necessarily super accurate? No. But it is funny. And if you have a sense of humor about yourself and you can take the jokes, great movie. Fantastic movie even. And the soundtrack is great. That's all I have for required readings for this week. Next week we'll probably do a couple more. Our song of the day is 680 South by The Story So Far. I love The Story So Far. I saw them in concert like a month ago at this point. Yeah, that's all I got for y'all. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. If you really liked it, don't be afraid to share it with your friends. I promise it won't ruin your individuality. Your friends can like the same things as you. You can also go follow the podcast on Instagram at thispodhasalongname_emo. So long. Good night.